So here we are. I put the notice for this up very, very late. And I haven't left a screen up so I can see on YouTube whether anyone is watching. So let me pull that up while you guys are getting assembled. Okay. So highly unlikely anyone's going to be here. Well, maybe. But I'm just going to go on and do my thing anyway. And then hopefully it resonates with your thing. I'm learning things about equipment every day. Today our goal is to have a video that doesn't have where the voice and the image sync. And I will only know this once I see the resultant video. So today's topic is intense awareness of impermanence. And I am watching see if anybody's joining me, but no, not yet. So last week we talked about, just to review, starting to get a handle on what it would be like to practice if with impermanence as your main focus of your practice. I actually practice with impermanence as the main focus of my practice. When I was in my early 30s and starting my preliminary practices for our Buddhist tradition. It was maybe 2 or 3 years into that I learned that I had the breast cancer gene mutation, BRCA2. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to get breast cancer, but I'm at extremely high risk for that and for ovarian cancer. So that was, especially in the mind of a young'un like a 32-year-old, that was cause for a lot of emotions. And I couldn't, there was choices, like I could get my breast lopped off, for example, and then rebuild fake breasts on the front. And maybe it's upsetting somebody with breast cancer for me to call them fake breasts. But, they don't have any sensation and so forth. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not like getting a breast augmentation where you retain the functioning of your breasts. It's the skin of your breasts, some muscle put inside to make them look like breasts that are attractive. But they don't do anything. Because the nerves are cut, right? So you had that choice. I could do that. It's yum, right? And then, or I could... And I could get my ovaries removed, which was highly recommended. And I actually did that at one point when I was having other surgery done. And I just said, okay, take them out. And that would reduce my breast cancer risk indirectly, and of course my ovarian cancer risk was eliminated. So with that holding that shocking realization that I was likely to get breast cancer at some point in my life, and actually I think my risks are higher of dying to it than your average female, it really lit a fire under my ass about practice. But I think that kind of awareness of impermanence was laced with anxiety and hopes and fears about having a long life. Yes, it was great for prioritizing what was important to me, and I made a choice to prioritize the practice of Dharma and do all kinds of in-depth practice. At the same time, because was then and I am now an unrealized being. Welcome to my viewer, whoever it is tonight. It was, contaminated, this virtue of wanting to practice. There was some, fear. It was fear-based. And it was related to my hopes of living a long life and so forth. So this hopes and fear thing, living in relation to the future. And now, I'm going back now and I'm reading Patrul Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher in preparation for this class each week. The very culmination of the section on impermanence at about page 55, 56. You don't have to read it, but if you want to, you can. He's more talking about what we touched on last week with this moment-by-moment consciousness of impermanence, hour by hour during your day. And I have been practicing this way for the last couple of weeks, and boy, it's good. It's so good. And the synchronicity is really interesting of having this epidemic come through. Where I had, for example, gone to a lot of lengths and pinned with a lot of hopes and fears to have a Dharma class happened in the Dharma or meditation class, a little more on the secular side than my usual streak, down where people work in Oakland. And I held on as long as I could, but eventually the space is not shutting down, but everybody's fled. The staff is working at home. Every people around here. And perhaps it's shaded a little bit by the fact that the big media companies are tied in with the South Bay, where the epidemic is very bad. Actually, it's bad. It's not very bad yet. I hope it doesn't get that way in Santa Clara County. So, Facebook, people working from home, Google, et cetera, probably Twitter's, I think, in San Francisco. So those decisions came along one after another, and then the Oakland businesses were deciding what to do. And, we still did a class on Friday. Lori, if that's you there with me tonight, thank you for coming. And we had one person come, but clearly everything needs to sort of shut down. We need to attend to the fact that we have a very serious illness in the environment. And based on love, particularly for old people. Somebody died recently, Bay Area, 65. That's old. Your risk is, somewhat elevated in your 60s and 70s more, and the 80s more of succumbing to the illness, but there's all kinds of suffering and so forth that's short of actually dying of it, hospitalization and, serious medical intervention. So the public at large, I've been struck by their kindness because, of course, there's people that are only concerned about themselves and their own health. But many very, insightful people are getting that it's not such a big deal for you if you're 30 or 40, or if you're even a kid. But we can become you can become unwitting pools for the disease for other people. So we have to think about the welfare of the whole community if we want to be good humans. So that's swept through, and now in the middle of this impermanence time, right? So last night we practiced for the people who have died. And tonight I want to go through more slowly and augment what we discussed last week about how you can make impermanence your only practice. I'm going to start right at the most striking line of this in the book, which was, if you don't do this practice of impermanence, if you don't really take moment to moment, really seriously, it's an evolving thing. You start at a certain place just thinking, okay, this building is not going to be here forever, and then it becomes, you really begin to go into how do I work with really, if I really accepted the atmosphere of complete uncertainty about continuity, moment-to-moment continuity, where would it take me? And then we get to go deeper and deeper, which is what I'm doing right now. I hope you're doing a little bit of that, if you've been following along. So the punchline I never quite got to was, if you don't do the practice, any practice you do is going to make you worse and worse. Isn't that horrible? It's like, not just it won't do you any good. Well, that's hard enough to hear. But it will actually make you worse. What do we think about that? So, well, you think about what you think about that. Why would that be? If you want to chime in, viewer, about why would that be? That if you don't really take to heart impermanence, then any practice you do, including, all your shamatha, all your bodhicitta practice even, all your fancy practices of Vajrayana, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, or in other systems, Vipassana, Metta, I'm thinking of the names of their practices. Shikanza, I can't remember the name of how to pronounce the Soto Zen practice. These wonderful, exalted practices can make you worse. Why is that? Feel free to put in the chat box. Or if you're watching later, you can put a comment down below. So, to review, there was this procedure of to really get this, walking through your day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep at night, saying, this is my last act in the world. And giving this broadcast is the last thing I'm ever going to do. Or if you're, in your case, watching this, it's the last thing. It makes sense, yeah. Feel free to say more, Heart Sutra. What if you sit here and you think watching this video is the last thing I'm ever going to do in this life? I'm not going to answer that question with my experience. And then, will I, when I'm going someplace, maybe when I go there, maybe I'll never come back. Will I die? And when you stop at a rest area on the way to where you're going, am I going to die right here? And then when you go to sleep at night, will I wake up in the morning? And then when you wake up in the morning, you say, will I die during this day? Welcome, new viewer. And so we discussed that last week, but then, the teacher in this book goes on to say, that's not enough. Geez, that's a lot. You have to encourage yourself to practice really sincerely. Remembering that the activities of what they call samsara, cyclic existence, our experience, the activities of our day, the normal everyday way we function as human beings, which is a kind of mammal, are transient. They're just coming and going randomly, and they're totally meaningless. We'll talk about that more next week and the subsequent weeks we're delving into this idea of cyclic existence. And yeah, if impermanence isn't your base, then what is? Where can you find? Yeah, really. Well, if you're practicing, that's an answer to the question of if we're practicing, Tara, for example, then you're going have and that YouTube kind of shut down on me for a minute there. It is still shut down. What is that about? I hope I'm broadcasting. Don't see any sign that I am. But we'll keep going anyway. Because connections are impermanent, right? Suddenly, in the middle of this broadcast, I can see my image on Facebook, and it's like all pixelated and frozen. And for a while, it said one person was watching when I had 3 before. Now it's back to saying 3, 2. It's just kind of all sorts of random gobbledygook. Okay. So here you go. Here's how you practice. Because the conjunction of this meeting of the body and mind that have come together to create us as a human, our human experience, is impermanent. Don't think of it as truly yours. It's only on loan. Think about your body and mind as, don't really identify with them all that much. It's just a loan, kind of. Temporary. And the roads and paths that we walk on, they're all impermanent. Every road, you've seen the pictures of Chernobyl. And I'm talking about Chernobyl, and from my perspective, looking at my internet feed, the whole thing's gone down. The brief thought came across my mind. It's like, what if there was a nuclear war and I didn't know about it? That's where mind goes as a baby boomer, who grew up in the early 60s when I don't remember hiding under desks to prepare for a nuclear war, but we were trained to really believe in the possibility of annihilation. That's another blessing we have as boomers, and I'm sure you have lots if you're a younger person. So the roads we have towards impermanent, and so direct your steps towards Dharma. So there's this idea of maybe it can be done in many ways. Yangtang Tulku Rinpoche was a great master of the Nyingma school. I'm back. I can see the internet working again. And during one of the years he was here, the final times he was here in the United States before he went back to the state of peace from which he emerged, meaning he passed. He said, I can come and he talks about mind training. He said, I've come here for many years and I talk about all these high teachings of Sokpa Chempo and so forth, the great perfection teachings of the Nyingma school. But you guys, you aren't really going to do it. You aren't really going to practice that to its culmination, at least. So I really recommend that you do the practice of Amitabha as the mind training of Amitabha. So I'm coming to where you're walking towards. So you're always seeing Amitabha, Buddha, Red Buddha Amitabha in front of you, and you're walking towards Dharma in the center, or his Amitabha in his Pure Land. That's one way of doing things. And then a few times a day you bow to Amitabha in his blissful Pure Land. And so always remembering Amitabha, it leads to a very positive outcome of being able to enter into that state of blissful emptiness, conjoined, that is known as Dewa Chen, or the Great Bliss Pure Land. And have some really good practice. And then, really move forward spiritually. So that's one way of doing them, sort of visualized entity. But whatever, think I'm going towards the Dharma, I'm going towards the Buddha with every step. We haven't meditated yet. So I think I want to get through this list so we can do some nice meditation. Then this place is temporary. And so you always want to keep the Buddha fields in mind. And again, he's talking about, for example, Amitabha's Pure Land. When you get to be a grown-up Vajrayana practitioner, actually of probably any Mahayana school, too, you can see the perfectly pure form of our whole entire experience right now in the present, rather than solidifying or trying to make a Buddha with 2 arms and 2 legs and so forth. That's a training practice. Then, so all our food and drink and all our things we enjoy. What do you enjoy? Enjoy flower. It's a special day. It's this very important day in the Tibetan Buddhist calendar. In a year there'll be dirt, soil. Then sleep is impermanent, and this is the one that really surprised me. He said, so while you sleep, purify sleep's delusions in clear light. And that's a really high practice, this practice of Osel, which is done by yogis. You can read about it in a beautiful book called White Sail by Tinley Norba Rinpoche, towards about 3/4 of the way through. Also called luminosity practice. But anyway, to simplify, we can say, if we're really aware of impermanence and we're sitting in that awareness, when I say to myself, oh, I got 1 hour left. So things flash through my mind. What do I want to do with my hour? And I think about calling my brother. Mm-hmm. I have, last week when I was working with, I was having a lot of stuff about my will, and also the house has to be tidy. Why that's true, I really don't know. It's all going to be ripped apart after I pass anyway, but it's all going to be sold. Everything's inside it, and if you're given away to friends and so forth, so who cares? I don't think my brother, who would be the one to come and clear it out, cares. So I go through that. I used to go through that, but now there's a kind of, I think, okay, I'm dying in an hour. It's like, oh, I'm done. My work is done. I can just set it down, and all the things I thought were important, all the plans I had, all the lists I'd made, are of no consequence whatsoever. What's really important is how I am right now. And then you're resting in this kind of bright state, like the sun is shining in your heart. Or there's a metaphor, will you say, of luminosity, a sense of light in your heart. And you're resting relaxed and bright and aware with those puffs of joy that we've talked about. And that's your job. That's it. And that's kind of a relief. And so then to stay in that state 24 hours a day, we have to be reminding ourselves of impermanence if we're following this practice path, which is a good one. And in night, when you sleep, continue it through the night, Go to sleep in this state of bright, luminous awareness and carry it through the night. So I've honestly let that practice slip myself. We spent some time on it in my training, and I haven't been able to do much with dream yoga, but there's two practices for the night for us Tibetan Buddhist practitioners. One is working with dreams, and the other is this clear light or luminosity practice. So I'm going to do it now, every night for 7 days. Try to get in the habit, back in the habit, and see what happens. So let's, why don't we just practice now for a little bit. Seeing a kind of moon-like glowing orb in our hearts. And the light rays are shining out, illuminating our whole body is like a shell, immaterial, made of light. And the light is beaming out from that into our head, into our arms and legs, into our torso. And then the glow continues out into space. Let's rest like that for a little bit. So what else is impermanent? Wealth is impermanent, if you have any. So instead, strive for the riches of faith, discipline, learning, generosity, conscientiousness, modesty, and wisdom. Loved ones, friends, and family are all impermanent. My full family is dead, except for my brother. I love my brother very much, but he and I are both impermanent. So go to a solitary place and arouse the desire of liberation. Why do they say that always? Go to a solitary place. It sounds like such a bummer, doesn't it? Unless you're really a introvert like me. I always was intrigued by these, the image of a yogini in a cave on a mountaintop. And I've done that, you know. It is lonely. But what's the point of that, you know? Because I think mostly it's to develop this, we're so shaped and formed by the people around us, right? We're designed to fit in with the dominant mode, and we're shaped by politically, we're shaped personally, and we really have to spend time alone in this life. It doesn't mean you have to be miserable. Even time alone going someplace you love, someplace peaceful and pretty, just spending the day walking around a beautiful, in my case it might be a beautiful garden, you know. Whatever your thing is, could be drag racing. Without just a whole lot of distractions, though. So take some time, sit down out of the drag race, between races, and just sit there and contemplate impermanence. And arouse this desire to be free from samsara. So what else is impermanent? Any ranking or status that we get in this life, like position, power. It could be as a mother or father, or as a business person or politician, whatever. And instead, the instruction is to always take the lowest position. In Tibetan culture, you physically go and sit in the lowest place. They actually literally rank people like about how high the surface is they sit on. And it's it's also a very class-conscious society. And it's arguable that we are too. But all that baloney, high, low, whatever, is abated by always just going to the lowest place. Always, sitting in the back of the shrine room. I've had to learn that the hard way because I can't sit on the floor for long periods of time anymore. Well, for example, the High Lama's up there and everybody's clamoring to get in first. Well, you should have a few times where you're up close to the Lama just to experience that, but why not let other people go and sit in the front? Why are we so important, And then, for example, those are things that are important in my life, And so, speech, all our words are impermanent. It's just nobody's going to remember what we said in our lives unless we have videos floating around on YouTube, but they won't even last all that long, I'm sure. Nobody cares in the long term what we say because it's all just stupid stuff, weather, pointless, our little emotional freakouts and what we want, what we need, what we don't want. It's all baloney. It's worthless, right? Lamatar Rinpoche used to say, if our jaws were made of steel, they would have been worn down from all the yak that we do. But it's only because we have sort of regenerating tissue that we have a jaw anymore. So what do you do, with speech? Well, recite prayers and mantras, for example. Say positive things, at least. Faith and desire for liberation are impermanent. Isn't that an interesting example? we have these fleeting, superficial things. Oh, we want to practice the Dharma. Oh, that Lama, he's so wonderful. Then the Lama says, one critical thing of you, and it's over, right? You can't handle it. You fall apart like a dandelion blown, the seeds of a dandelion blown away. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but you know what I mean? Little things can happen or suddenly, something, vacation seems really important. Dharma doesn't seem that important. So what's the point? So instead, work on making your commitments unshakable. And right now, at this level, there isn't any commitment. You don't have any commitment, but think about making a commitment. Taking refuge, we'll be talking about eventually. Means make a commitment to the Dharma, for example. Or if you're not a Buddhist, making a commitment to something else, you're really going to pursue that has lasting meaning. Ideas and thoughts are impermanent. Well, that's for sure. So focus on developing a good nature, being just a good person. You don't need all these concepts. Then I'm saying that to myself too. Then meditative experience and realization. These are the two categories of what happens in practice. It's interesting that realization is kind of there because you really want realization, right? You don't want these. Meditation experiences are these, you have a blissful time. Something shifts in your nervous system, brain and nervous system. You get a blissful experience for an hour, or a day, or 2 days, or 3 days, and then it dissipates like mist. And then you can't get it back no matter how much you try, and everybody tries, right? And that, or maybe psychic experiences, or whatever we have physical constitution that make us more likely to or not to have different kinds of meditation experiences, and they're good because they're inspiring they inspire you to practice more. But if you latch onto them and you're just trying to recreate them, then it's totally pointless, and believe me, I've tried. And then realization, I haven't had realization, but this is usually pointed to as a positive, like a real breakthrough experience. Really, the term tokpa, or realization in Tibetan, is a funny one. It's used kind of in the Sarma traditions, like Kagyu tradition, Gelugpa, Sakya. They'll have this plural realizations, like epiphanies, like, oh, I get it. Or you have an experience and it sticks with you in some way. But the way they talk about it in this tradition of my teachers who come from the Dzogchen tradition is Tokpa is like this is the way Lama Tarchen did anyway. He was like a really Nyingma Lama, really not very influenced by anybody but Dudjom Rinpoche and Tili Norbu Rinpoche and Chatron Rinpoche. Tokpa is a complete breakthrough, equivalent to like entering onto the Bodhisattva bhumis would be regarded in the Sarma, or the new schools of Tibetan Buddhism, where permanently your mind is changed so that you have, it's like the top of your skull is blown off, not literally, but there's a completely different non-dual experience of reality, of emptiness, like a direct experience of emptiness, I guess you'd say, like it's talked about on the first level of awakening, on the gradualist schools, instructional level. So what do we have beyond liberation, meditative experiences and realizations? Go to the point where everything dissolves into the nature of reality. Dharmata, nature of reality. Chini, Dharmata, the truth, the ultimate truth. Okay, that sounds good. Let's go to the point where everything dissolves into ultimate truth. At that time, he says, the link between birth and death falls away. That means that actually death and birth, when we die, we aren't going to be reborn into that cut. There's a cut there. We're able to gain realization in this life or in the intermediate state between this life and the next, because we aren't being driven along by our deluded self. We're being driven by pure present, luminous awareness. Sounds good. And so they fall away, and then you reach such confidence that you're completely ready for death. So there's something else beyond this cyclic existence consciousness. You found something else, and you rest in that state, just like this pure present awareness we're talking about with impermanence, right? You could be poised there with the past moment over, moments going through, blip, 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 and you're poised, and sometimes called the fourth time beyond time. Past, present, future, and then there's this underlying present luminous awareness. Scholars don't like the word awareness very much, but I think you get the feel that transcends all that. So let's, this is just kind of an experiment here, but why don't we just try to rest in that. Before we have the moon shining in our hearts, let's try to. We can drop the contrivance of the moon shining in our hearts and rest in this utter luminosity. Okay. So I just want to make a note that I know when you're practicing, there may be a need to criticize yourself and focus on the part that's not luminous, not aware, and so forth, right? But that's not the way we do it. Just and don't criticize yourself for not getting it right either. Remember, our practice is thinking about Buddhas and Pure Lands. We're always focused on and walking forward towards the Dharma. There's nothing written here in all those instructions about what to do with your day about, making a list of the faults with your meditation. I didn't see that on here. And it's really hard to get, but I'll tell you, Dongse Tilinor Rinpoche, this is Zonsar Khyentse Rinpoche's father, said to me one time when I went up to him, and I was just I was so frustrated with the kind of envelope of stupidity that envelops my meditation and this. And anyway, I went up to him, and it's not like I had access. Islam was very inaccessible, but there was an opportunity where we could all go up and have a brief exchange with him. And I said, Rinpoche, and he was a very critical Lama. He could be. When people were really, he wasn't one to coddle people, right, when they were really getting off track. So I just said, Rinpoche, please tell me my faults. And he said, what faults? And it's not like I don't have faults, right? He said, when you think that way, and I thought maybe he didn't hear me, understand me. And I said, my faults, my obscurations. So I was really frustrated and working hard to try to get rid of this unenlightened part. He said, when you think that way, think about Guru Rinpoche and Vajrasattva, inseparable. So Guru Rinpoche is the personification of the sort of guiding principle. The wisdom that knows every practice, accomplished every practice, and so forth, and is guiding you. And Vajrasattva is utter purity, having purified everything. And so merging these, we rest in that state. Not a feeling like there's something wrong. Yeah. I think that was a really important teaching to me. He was the kind of teacher that one little brief interaction like that could really change your life. So, Buddha said again that, meditating on impermanence is like making offerings to all the Buddhas. It's like being rescued from suffering by all the Buddhas. And you can see now how that could be. It's guided by all the Buddhas. It's like being blessed by all the Buddhas, all the awakened beings of the past and future, blessing you when you do the practice of impermanence. So the example that's given, a famous example from this book is there was a famous Dharma scholar, Geshe Karak Gamchong. You remember this story? Maybe you've heard this story before. And he meditated in a cave. And caves weren't any special place; they were just free abodes, right? It was you go up in the mountains and you meditate in a free place. the cave. And there was a thorn bush of really painful thorns just outside that cave, and every time he went in and out, it would rip him, give him scratches and stuff. And people would say to him, Geshe, why don't you cut that bush back? And he said, well, I'm not really sure that I'm going to be here next time. I'm not sure that tomorrow, the next time, I'm not sure I'm going to live long enough to go out of the cave once I'm in it, and I'm not sure that once I'm out of it, I'm going to be coming back into it. There's just much higher priorities in my life than wasting even a moment on this silly thing. And he went on like that for decades. And the bush never got cut. I can't imagine how long those tendrils of rose thorns were. So that's the kind of way we think as yogis and yoginis, if you want to take it to the extreme. And likewise, Jigme Lingpa, a great saint of our tradition, he was traveling with his students, and there was a place they go every summer, and like we go to the beach or something, they go to a hot springs. And it was hard to get into, how natural pools can be hard to get into, slippery and so forth. They'd kind of help him down into there. Maybe he was old at that point. And they said, Lama, let us cut some stairs into the stone here and make it into something, real hot springs where you can easily get in and out. He said, nah, I don't even know if I'm going to be around next year. Why bother? He's just going to waste time, right? So those are two examples that are given. So the essence, I know you all know this, but every practice you do, the three goods, they're good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, right? So it's good in the beginning if you dedicate any merit or positive energy generated from this practice to all sentient beings equally, right? When you start your practice, really do. And then when you're be present with the practice in the middle, and that's the second good. They'll say like one-pointed concentration. Well, yeah, we're going to have one-pointed concentration. That's unlikely. But if you are present with the practice, stay present with it, and when your mind wanders off to here and there, gently bring it back. Any practice you do, it's good. And then the end, we dedicate the merit. So we start with the intention to dedicate, we do the practice, and then we really say anything that really good that comes out of this, don't give it to me, give it to all sentient beings. So that's wonderful. So I'm going to dedicate the practice the way we used to say it in the 90s in the Shambhala Center, where I learned Mahayana Buddhism a little bit. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. Thank you for joining me tonight. We had Heart, you're really hanging in there. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do another ceremony for the dead in the next week. We'll just see what happens. We had our first California death. Yes, a 65-year-old woman passed away yesterday. But we don't need to think about Californians any more than the thousands who've died. I had the numbers again. Let me look at them again. Yes, thousands. Probably more than 4,000 today, I imagine, as the numbers are going up. And then we'll see you again next Monday. All right, thank you very much. I'll see ya. Bye-bye.